The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning in January. Slid through the door of room 412 at New York Presbyterian Hospital by a man in a gray suit who did not make eye contact. Serena Wade was lying in a hospital bed when it happened. She had just come out of a 6-hour cardiac surgery 3 days before. Her chest was still wrapped in bandages. There was a thin tube running from her left arm to a bag of saline hanging on a metal pole beside her. Her hair was unwashed. Her lips were dry. She had not slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since the operation. She was 44 years old, and she was, by every visible measure, at the lowest point of her life. The man in the gray suit, she would later learn he was a junior associate at her husband's law firm, set the envelope on the tray beside her untouched cup of hospital coffee. He cleared his throat once. Then he said, "Mr. Calloway asked me to deliver these personally." Serena looked at the envelope for a long moment. Her name was written on the front in neat black type. Mrs. Serena Calloway, not Wade. Not the name she had been born with, the name she had quietly kept alive in documents and deeds and shell companies for 12 years while building something her husband knew nothing about. She did not open the envelope right away. She turned her head toward the window. Outside, Manhattan was gray and cold. The East River was the color of steel. Somewhere below, she could hear the distant sound of a cab horn. Ordinary life going on without her. Behind her, in the corner of the room, a woman sat in a chair. She had been there since 6 that morning. She was dressed in a navy blazer, her dark hair pulled back, and her reading glasses perched at the end of her nose. She had not moved when the man in the gray suit came in. She had not spoken. She just watched, very still the way someone watches when they already know exactly what is coming. Her name was Oliver Nash. She was Serena's attorney, her closest friend from their college years at Georgetown, and the only person alive who knew the full truth about who Serena Wade really was. When the man in the gray suit left, Oliver set down her folder. She did not say, "I'm sorry." She did not reach for Serena's hand. She simply said in a quiet, even voice, "Do you want me to read it first?" Serena shook her head. She picked up the envelope. She opened it slowly, pulling out the document with 2 fingers, the way you might pull a splinter from your skin. Careful, deliberate, not letting yourself flinch. She read it. All of it. Every clause, every line, every carefully worded paragraph that Brett Calloway's $300 an hour lawyers had drafted to make sure she walked away with as little as possible. When she finished, she set the papers down on the tray. She looked at the ceiling. She did not cry. She did not speak for almost a full minute. Then she turned to Oliver and said, very quietly, "He has no idea, does he?" It was not a question. Oliver picked up her glasses, folded them, set them on top of her folder, and said, "Not even close." Through the hospital window, the gray Manhattan skyline sat silent and enormous. And somewhere in that city, Brett Calloway was already celebrating. He had no idea that the woman he had just discarded in a hospital bed was about to become the most dangerous person in his life. Serena Wade had never been the kind of woman who asked for attention. She grew up in a modest house in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the only child of Eleanor Wade, a high school math teacher, and a father who left when Serena was 7 and never came back. Eleanor had raised her daughter on discipline, books, and the quiet, steady belief that a woman's worth was not determined by who stood beside her, but by what she built with her own hands. By the time Serena graduated summa cum laude from Georgetown with a degree in finance, she had already taught herself the basics of real estate law, market analysis, and capital structuring. Not because anyone asked her to, but because she could not stop herself from wanting to understand how money moved in the world. Where it came from, where it went, who controlled it. She met Brett Calloway at 26 at a charity dinner in Washington, D.C., during a season of her life when she was still figuring out the shape of her own ambition. He was handsome, confident, and already running a small but growing real estate development firm. He had the kind of energy that filled a room, loud, magnetic, impossible to ignore. He told her she was the smartest woman he had ever met. She believed him, because back then, she had not yet learned to measure a man by what he did when no one was watching. They married when she was 27. She moved to New York. She helped him, quietly, steadily, invisibly, build Calloway Developments into a respected mid-size firm. She wrote the financial models. She spotted the undervalued properties. She negotiated with lenders when Brett's ego got in the way. She did it all without needing her name on the door, because she was building something else, something of her own, something she had not told him about. 12 years before the divorce papers arrived in that hospital room, Serena had quietly incorporated a holding company under her mother's name, Eleanor J. Wade Investments, LLC. A small thing at first, a few $100,000 from an inheritance her father had, in a rare moment of conscience, left her when he died. She had taken that money and made her first investment, a distressed commercial property in the Bronx. Purchased at auction for less than its assessed value, and sold 18 months later for nearly 3 times what she paid. She reinvested, she expanded, she was careful, methodical, and almost pathologically patient. And she moved through the market the way water moves through stone. Slowly, quietly, without drama, wearing everything down. By the time Brett handed her those divorce papers, Wade Capital Group had assets under management worth $1.3 billion. It owned properties in Manhattan, Chicago, Miami, and San Francisco. It had 14 full-time employees and 6 silent partners, none of whom had ever met Serena in person. Its public face was a man named Thomas Reed, a former colleague she trusted completely, who operated out of a clean, modest office in San Francisco's financial district. Brett knew none of this. He thought he was divorcing a woman with no income, no assets in her own name, and no future worth worrying about. He thought the surgery had broken her. He thought the woman in that hospital bed was exactly what she appeared to be: exhausted, dependent, and finished. He was wrong about every single thing. And the most important detail he had missed, the one that would eventually unravel everything he thought he had built, was sitting in a small envelope in a safe deposit box at a Chase branch on 5th Avenue, addressed in his wife's handwriting to their 10-year-old adopted daughter, Lily. The letter began, "When you are old enough to understand, here is the truth." Serena had been home from the hospital for 9 days when the second letter arrived. She was staying in a rented apartment on the Upper West Side, a clean, spare 2-bedroom that Oliver had arranged in a hurry, paid for from a personal account that had nothing to do with Brett. The apartment had white walls and a kitchen that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and a window that looked out over a courtyard where pigeons walked in slow circles every morning. It was the most anonymous place Serena had ever lived. And for the first few days, the anonymity felt almost like safety. She was still moving slowly. Her chest ached when she breathed too deeply. She slept sitting up because lying flat still hurt. Every morning she made a cup of tea, just hot water and a bag of chamomile, something her mother had always kept in the house. And she sat at the small kitchen table and looked out the window and reminded herself, one breath at a time, that she was still standing. The letter came through Oliver, forwarded from the law firm. It was from Brett's attorneys at Hargrove and Klein, one of the most aggressive family law practices in New York. The subject line read, "Motion for sole custody of minor child, Lily Grace Calloway." Serena read it 3 times before the words stopped blurring. Brett was filing for full custody of Lily, not joint, full. He was claiming that Serena's medical condition made her unfit to provide stable care. He cited the cardiac surgery. He cited a 30-day period of hospitalization 18 months earlier that had been for exhaustion and stress, which his attorneys had somehow obtained and reframed as a psychological crisis. He was asking the court to restrict Serena's access to Lily to supervised visits, 2 hours a week, until further evaluation. Lily was 10 years old. Serena and Brett had adopted her together when Lily was 3. Lily called Serena Mom. She had called her mom every single day for 7 years. Serena set the letter on the kitchen table. She pressed both hands flat on the surface. She looked at the courtyard below. A pigeon was eating something near the drain. The sky was white and flat with February cold. She did not make a sound. Oliver called 10 minutes later, as if she had known. "I've already pulled the filing," Oliver said. "They moved fast. Brett must have had this prepared for weeks." "He prepared this while I was in surgery," Serena said. Her voice was very flat. "Most likely while you were in the hospital, yes." Serena closed her eyes. She thought about Lily, about the way Lily still climbed into her lap, even though she was almost too big for it. About the way Lily said, "Mom, you smell like home," when she pressed her face into Serena's shoulder. She thought about the last time she had seen Lily, the day before the surgery, when Lily had held her hand in the pre-op waiting room and whispered, very seriously, "I'll be here when you wake up, Mom." Brett had not let Lily visit the hospital, not once. He had told the child that the doctor said it was better for Mom to rest. "Oliver," Serena said. "Yes. I want to fight this. I know. Not just the custody, all of it." A pause. Then Oliver said quietly, "I know that too. And I want you to know. We will. But Serena, there's something else in the filing that you need to see. Something Brett's lawyers attached that changes the landscape of this significantly." The line went silent for 3 full seconds. "He has a medical record," Oliver said carefully. One that was never supposed to be released. The medical record Brett's attorneys had attached to the custody filing was from a psychiatric evaluation Serena had undergone 9 years earlier. It was 2 pages long, written by a therapist she had seen for exactly 4 sessions after a particularly brutal stretch of overwork had left her with insomnia, chest tightness, and what she now recognized, looking back, as the early signs of burnout. The therapist had noted, in clinical language, that Serena showed signs of moderate anxiety with depressive features, and had recommended a follow-up evaluation. She had done the follow-up. She had completed a 12-week course of therapy. She had been fine. She had moved on. The record should have been sealed, protected by federal privacy law, inaccessible to anyone without her written consent. And yet, here it was, attached to a legal filing, formatted and paginated, sitting in a courthouse database in the borough of Manhattan. Oliver was already working the phone by the time Serena arrived at her office on Park Avenue. The firm was on the 22nd floor. Clean glass and dark wood, the kind of office that felt serious without being cold. Oliver was at her desk, reading glasses on, 2 phones in front of her, when Serena walked in. "I've contacted the therapist's office," Oliver said without looking up. "They have no record of authorizing release, which means someone obtained this illegally. Brett, almost certainly, or someone working for him. We're going to request a full audit of how this document was accessed. That alone could get the filing sanctioned." Oliver paused. But Serena, the problem isn't just legal, it's public. Serena sat down across from her. Jade Fontaine leaked it, Oliver said. The record, or summary of it. It went to 2 gossip blogs this morning and 1 business-adjacent news site. The framing is, sources close to Brett Calloway reveal that his estranged wife has a documented history of mental instability. Serena said nothing. It's already being shared, Oliver said. I'm sorry. Serena looked at her hands. She had a slight tremor in her left hand sometimes, post-surgery when she was tired. She pressed it flat on her knee to still it. Jade Fontaine. She had known about Jade for 14 months before the surgery. She had found out the ordinary, devastating way. A text message on Brett's phone that he had left unlocked on the kitchen counter one Sunday morning while he was in the shower. She had read 3 words and understood everything. She had set the phone back down exactly where she found it and had gone to make breakfast and had said nothing. She had said nothing because she was not ready. Because the timing was not right. Because she had needed 4 more months to move certain assets, complete certain transfers, and make certain arrangements that would determine the outcome of everything that followed. Jade was 35, ambitious, and currently serving as director of brand strategy at a media consulting firm in Midtown. She was also, Serena had long understood, not simply Brett's affair, but his partner in the dismantling of this marriage. Feeding him information, advising on optics, helping craft the narrative that made Serena the unstable, dependent wife and Brett the long-suffering, responsible husband. Now the story was out in public, on screens, in comment sections. Serena's phone buzzed, a notification from a news alert she had set. She looked at the headline, read it once, and put the phone face down on Oliver's desk. She took one long breath. "What do we do?" Oliver asked. Serena looked up. Her eyes were dry. Her jaw was steady. "Nothing yet," she said. "We let them feel safe." Neither of them spoke of what was locked inside a Chase safe deposit box on Fifth Avenue, because that silence was the most powerful thing they had left. There are kinds of pain that show on the outside. Swollen eyes, shaking hands, a voice that cracks in the middle of an ordinary sentence. And then there is the other kind. The kind that lives deep in the sternum, just below the surface of a perfectly composed face. It's burning so quietly that the person carrying it can go days without anyone knowing it is there. Serena Wade lived in the second kind. For 6 weeks after the custody filing and the leaked record, she kept her days structured to the point of rigidity. She woke at 6. She did the breathing exercises the cardiologist had given her, slow and measured, hands on her ribs. She made tea. She sat at the kitchen table and worked for 3 hours before Oliver arrived. Reviewing documents, making notes in a small leather-bound notebook she kept beside her laptop. In the evenings, she ate whatever she had the energy to cook. Usually something simple, rice and vegetables, soup from a can. And she went to bed at 10. She did not turn on the television. She did not read the comment sections. She did not call anyone except Oliver, and twice a week, the custody attorney Oliver had brought in from a firm in the financial district. She did not call Lily, because Brett had changed the number Lily used to reach her, and when Serena called the house, no one answered. That was the thing that nearly broke her. Not the leaked record, not the custody filing, not Jade Fontaine's name appearing in print next to Brett's in a real estate industry newsletter, described casually as his partner, as though 18 years of marriage had been nothing more than a speed bump on the road to wherever he was going now. None of that came close to the silence on the other end of the phone when she called the number Lily had memorized and left on the refrigerator in their old kitchen in the handwriting of a 7-year-old. One night, a Wednesday in March, Close to midnight, Serena sat at the kitchen table in the dark. She had not turned the lights on when the sun went down. She was not sure when she had stopped noticing. She had her phone in her hand, and she was looking at the last photo she had of Lily, taken the previous September, the two of them at a pumpkin patch in Westchester. Lily holding a small orange pumpkin in both arms, squinting into the sun, grinning the enormous, unguarded grin of a child who has never been given a reason not to trust the world. She pressed the photo to her chest, the way you might hold something you are afraid of losing. She stayed like that for a very long time. In the morning, she got up and made tea and opened her notebook. She had written one line before bed the night before at the top of a fresh page. What he does not know is still mine. Oh, she looked at that line. She read it twice. Then she uncapped her pen and began to write. Not notes, not strategy, not legal points. Something different. A list of everything she had built, quietly and without his knowledge, over 12 years of marriage. Property by property, company by company, decision by decision. She filled 3 pages. When she was done, she set the pen down. She looked out the window at the courtyard below, where the pigeons were walking their slow circles in the early light. She thought about Lily's laugh, the way it started in her nose first, a small snort, before it opened into something full and warm. She picked up her phone and called Oliver. "I'm ready," she said. On the other end of the line, a silence. And then a sound that might have been Oliver exhaling the breath she had been holding for weeks. And Oliver Nash had kept Serena's secret for 12 years, and the weight of it had never felt heavier than it did on the morning she spread the documents across the conference table in her office and said quietly, "It's time." The files were organized in 4 manila folders. Corporate formation records, asset acquisition history, financial statements for the past 3 fiscal years, and a sealed letter from Eleanor Wade, signed and notarized, attesting to the origins of the initial investment capital. 12 years of invisible, careful, deliberate work, laid out on a mahogany table in the pale light of a March morning. Oliver sat across from her. She looked at the folders for a long moment without speaking. "If we open this," Oliver said, "there is no closing it again." "I know. Brett will fight it. He'll claim you hid assets from the marital estate. He'll try to make this look like fraud. Let him. His lawyers are very good, Serena. So are ours." Oliver allowed herself a small, controlled smile. Then she opened the first folder. What Wade Capital Group represented, in legal terms, was not hidden marital property. Serena had taken meticulous care to ensure that. The seed capital had come entirely from a premarital inheritance, her father's estate, received before she and Brett had ever signed a marriage certificate. Under New York law, that money and everything it had produced was hers and hers alone. Oliver had known this from the beginning. It was why she had never advised Serena to disclose it during the marriage. There was no legal obligation to do so. Brett had no claim, not to a single square foot, or not to a single dollar. But there was something else in those folders that Oliver had not seen before. Something Serena had withheld, even from her, until now. It was a signed consulting agreement, dated 4 years earlier, between Wade Capital Group and Callaway Developments. Brett had come to the company through Thomas Reed, the firm's public-facing director, looking for a capital partner on a large mixed-use development in Queens. He had not known who he was dealing with. Thomas had handled every meeting, every call, every document exchange. The deal had closed. Callaway Developments had received a $40 million investment. The project had been profitable. Brett had sent a handwritten thank you note to Thomas Reed at the San Francisco office. The thank you note was in the folder. Oliver stared at it. "Then he borrowed money from your company," Oliver said slowly. "He borrowed money from his own wife, without knowing it." "Yes." "And that $40 million is now repaid, with interest, plus profit sharing from the Queen's project. The total return to Wade Capital was $61.3 million. Oliver set the note down carefully, as though it were made of something breakable. "He signed documents," Oliver said. "He has a legal relationship with this company. Which means, when this becomes public, he cannot claim he was an innocent party who had no contact with the entity. He did business with us. He just didn't know who we were." Oliver looked at her for a long time. "Serena," she said finally, "you planned this." Serena looked back at her, and her expression was neither triumphant nor cold. It was simply clear, by the way the air is clear after a long storm has finally passed. "I hoped I would never have to use it," she said. "But I made sure it existed, just in case." Outside, a cloud shifted over the city. A shaft of morning sun came through the 22nd floor windows and laid itself across the table, bright and exact and impossible to miss. Neither woman moved to close the folders. 3 days later, someone leaked the folders. Not all of them. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough, a single data point, a whisper dropped in the right ear, to alert Brett Callaway that his estranged wife was sitting on something large and very dangerous to him. Serena found out the way she found out most things. Quietly, through a person who noticed an anomaly and was loyal enough to mention it. Oliver called her at 7:15 on a Thursday morning to say that Brett's lead attorney at Hargrove and Klein had made a call the previous afternoon to a financial intelligence firm in Midtown. The kind of firm that was paid to build asset profiles on individuals in contentious divorce proceedings. The call had lasted 22 minutes. "They know something exists," Oliver said. "They don't know what. But they're looking." Serena stood in her kitchen. The tea was going cold. She turned the mug slowly in her hands. "Someone talked?" she said. "Yes." "Someone who had access." Silence on the line. There were 4 people who knew the specifics of Wade Capital Group's structure. Oliver, Thomas Reed in San Francisco, Eleanor, who was barely aware of the full scope, and one other person, a man named Kevin Marsh, 31 years old, on who had served as Serena's executive assistant for 3 years and who she had trusted with scheduling, document filing, and the management of her encrypted correspondence. She had hired Kevin on Oliver's recommendation. She had trusted him completely. She had paid him well, given him flexibility, defended him to others when people questioned his judgment. She had thought of him. In moments of sentimentality, she rarely allowed herself, as something like a younger brother. She called his cell phone, straight to voicemail. She called the secondary number he used for work. Voicemail. She sent a message through the encrypted channel they used for sensitive communication. The message showed as delivered. He did not respond. She sat down. She did not allow herself to feel what she was feeling. Not yet. Not fully. Because feeling it fully would cost her time she did not have. She set it to the side, very deliberately, the way you set a glass down on a shelf, knowing you will come back to it later. She called Oliver back. "It was Kevin?" she said. A pause. "I think so too." "How much did he sell?" "Enough to confirm that you have a significant holding structure that Brett has no visibility into. They now know a number exists. They don't know it yet." "How long do we have?" Their investigator is good. A week, maybe 10 days, before they get close enough to identify the entity. Serena stood up. She walked to the window and looked down at the street below. A delivery truck, a woman with a stroller, a man in a coat reading something on his phone. Ordinary life, moving at ordinary speed. "Where is Kevin now?" she asked. His access credentials were used at Callaway Development's office building twice this week, Oliver said, Monday morning and yesterday afternoon. Brett had not simply paid Kevin for information. He had brought him inside. He had given him a desk and a role and probably the feeling of being on the winning side. Serena pressed 2 fingers to the glass. It was cold from the outside. "Pull all his access," she said, "and call Thomas. Tell him to move the timeline up." To when? She thought about the consulting agreement in the folder, the thank you note in Brett's handwriting, the $61 million that had flowed from her company to his and back again without him ever knowing whose hands had held it. "To now," she said. Thomas Reed landed at JFK on a Friday evening in late March. Serena had not seen him in 4 years. They had worked together for 12, the entirety of Wade Capital Group's existence, through encrypted emails, quarterly video calls, and the occasional secure document exchange. He was the company's public face, the name on the business cards, the voice in the meetings, the man who sat across the table from investors and developers and attorneys and never once let slip that the person who had built everything around him was a woman living quietly in Manhattan, married to a man who had no idea what she was. She had hired Thomas on instinct, which was not the way she usually made decisions. He had been a colleague at a real estate investment trust, where she had done contract consulting work in the early years of her marriage. She had seen, in 3 months of working alongside him, that he was disciplined, discreet, and possessed of an ethical core that was rare in people with his talent for the business. She had offered him a founding partnership in something she described, at the time, as a long-term investment vehicle. He had said yes without asking many questions, which told her what she needed to know about his ability to operate under uncertainty. He was 52 years old. He had never been married. He drove a used Subaru Outback in San Francisco and kept a MacBook Air on a standing desk in an office the size of a large closet. He was, by the standards of the world he moved through on Serena's behalf, almost conspicuously modest. He texted her from baggage claim, "Here, where do you want to meet?" She wrote back, "The River Cafe, 7 o'clock. She was already there when he arrived, and at a corner table by the window with a view of the Manhattan Bridge lit up gold against the dark water. She had ordered sparkling water and a small plate of bread that she had not touched. She was wearing a dark green sweater and no jewelry. She looked exactly like herself, which was, Thomas had always thought, the most disarming thing about her. In a world that dressed power and spectacle, Serena Wade carried hers like something tucked quietly in an inside pocket. He sat down across from her. He looked at her for a moment, at the faint lines of exhaustion around her eyes, the deliberate steadiness of her posture. And he did not say, "You look tired," or "You look good," or any of the things people say when they don't know what else to say. He said, "Tell me where we are." She told him everything. Kevin, the leak, Brett's investigators, like the timeline. Thomas listened without interrupting. He had brought a slim folder of his own, physical copies of documents he had printed and carried personally on the plane, trusting no digital transfer. He set it on the table between them when she was finished. "I have something you don't know about," he said. She looked at the folder. "Kevin didn't just leak your asset structure," Thomas said. He also told Brett's team about the consulting agreement. The Queen's Project. They know Callaway Developments did business with us. What they're trying to figure out now is whether they can use that to claim the arrangement was fraudulent. That you hid a business relationship from the marriage. They can't. No. But they're going to try. And in the meantime, he opened the folder and turned it toward her. Manon, Brett has applied for a $200 million line of credit from a consortium of private lenders. The application lists Callaway Developments assets, including his equity stake in the Queen's Project, as collateral. Serena looked at the page. He doesn't know that equity stake has conditions, Thomas said quietly. Conditions that Wade Capital Group controls. Serena looked up at him. Something moved across her face, not quite a smile, not quite relief. Something older and quieter. He's borrowing against something that belongs to us, she said. Thomas nodded. The bridge lights shimmered on the black water outside. Eleanor Wade was 70 years old, and she had been living at the Willowbrook Senior Living Residence in Westchester for 4 months by the time Serena found out where she was. Eleanor had moved there. No, she had been told, voluntarily. The paperwork described it as an elective transition to assisted care, initiated at the recommendation of her primary physician. Serena had not been informed because Eleanor had listed Brett Callaway as her emergency contact. Serena was not on the form at all. She found out from a neighbor in Eleanor's old apartment building in Yonkers. A woman named Grace, who had lived across the hall for 6 years and who had called Serena's cell number from memory because she was, as she put it, not comfortable with how the whole thing went. Your mother didn't seem like she wanted to go, Grace said on the phone. She seemed confused. There was a man with her, young, in a suit. She kept asking to call you first. Serena drove to Willowbrook the following morning, alone. She did not tell Oliver until she was already in the parking lot. The facility was clean and well maintained, a brick building set back from the road behind a row of old oak trees, with a circular driveway and a lobby that smelled of floor wax and artificial flowers. The staff at the front desk were polite. They confirmed that Eleanor Wade was a resident. They asked if Serena was on the approved visitor list. She was not. It took 40 minutes and a phone call from Oliver, who had called an attorney at a civil rights firm who had called the facility's legal department, before Serena was allowed to walk down the hall to room 114. Eleanor was sitting in a chair by the window when Serena came in. She was thinner than Serena remembered. Her hair was white and fine, pinned back at the neck. She had a crossword puzzle book in her lap. They opened to a page that appeared to be untouched. She looked up when Serena came through the door, and for a single moment her face held something naked and unguarded, relief and love and fear all at once. Before she composed herself into the steady, quiet expression that Serena had known since childhood. "My girl," Eleanor said. Just that. Serena sat on the edge of the bed closest to her mother's chair. She took Eleanor's hands in both of hers. Eleanor's fingers were cold. "He told me you needed space," Eleanor said after a moment. "That the doctors said contact would be stressful for your recovery. That you had asked not to be disturbed." "That's not true," Serena said. "I know," Eleanor said simply. "I knew. But I didn't know what to do about it." They sat together in the small room, the winter light coming thin through the curtain. And then Eleanor said, "I kept the envelope." Serena went very still. "I kept it," Eleanor repeated. "The one you gave me, years ago. You said to hold on to it and not give it to anyone, not even you, unless you asked for it yourself." Serena had given her mother the envelope 8 years ago. Inside it were the original formation documents for Wade Capital Group, the ones bearing Eleanor's own signature as nominal founder, the ones that trace the company's origins directly to the premarital inheritance, the ones that would, in any court of law, establish Serena's sole and undeniable ownership of everything the company had ever built. She had kept the originals with her mother because it was the last place anyone would ever think to look. Eleanor reached into the drawer of the small nightstand beside her chair. She withdrew a plain envelope, ivory, sealed with tape that had yellowed slightly at the edges. She held it out to her daughter. Serena took it with both hands. She did not open it. She just held it. "I knew you'd come," Eleanor said quietly. She checked Eleanor out of Willowbrook the next afternoon. It was not difficult, legally. Eleanor was not under any court order or medical hold, and once Oliver's contact had established that the original admission paperwork contained irregularities in the consent documentation, the facility's administrator had been very eager to cooperate. Eleanor walked out of room 114 with a small suitcase and her crossword puzzle book, and the careful dignity of a woman who had decided not to spend another minute being someone else's arrangement. Oliver had already arranged a furnished apartment in Riverdale, and close enough for Serena to reach in 20 minutes by car, private and comfortable, with a view of the Hudson through a row of bare winter trees. Eleanor stood at the window for a long time when she first walked in. Then she set down her crossword book and said, "This will do very well," and went to put the kettle on as though she had always lived there. That evening, Serena sat at Oliver's office table for 4 hours. The envelope from the nightstand was open in front of her, its contents spread across the mahogany beside Thomas's folder and Oliver's files. For the first time, all the pieces were in the same room at the same time. The original formation documents, the asset transfer records, the Queen's consulting agreement, Thomas's evidence of the collateral fraud, Kevin Marsh's name on a signed disclosure Oliver had obtained through a colleague who knew how to ask the right questions of the right people. Thomas sat at the far end of the table, his coffee untouched, reading through the chronology they had assembled. Oliver was on the phone, pacing by the window. Serena was writing. She had her notebook open and a pen in her hand, and she was writing in the deliberate, measured way she had always used for decisions that could not be undone. Not lists this time. Something more like an order of operations, the sequence in which each piece of information would be deployed, each legal action filed, each public disclosure timed. She had thought about this for a long time, not just in the weeks since the divorce papers. In truth, and she had thought about it for years. The way you think about an emergency exit that you hope you never have to use, but that you have memorized in careful detail just in case. When Oliver got off the phone, she said, "The custody evaluation has been scheduled for April 14th. 3 weeks, Serena said. Yes, we need to file our counter motion before then. Include the documentation of the leaked medical record, the illegal disclosure, and the evidence of Brett's attempts to obstruct your access to Lily. Do that first," Serena said. "Lily comes first. Everything else comes after." Thomas looked up from the chronology. "The credit application, I know. We have time." She set her pen down. "Let him submit it. Let him stake his collateral. We'll move on the credit application after the custody hearing." There was a moment of silence in the room. Outside, the city hummed in the dark, the faint sound of traffic, of life being lived at its ordinary pace, 12 floors below. Serena picked up her pen again. She was not the woman from room 412 at New York Presbyterian anymore. She was not the woman who had sat in a dark kitchen at midnight, holding a photograph to her chest. Something had shifted in her. Not loudly, not dramatically, not all at once. It had shifted the way ice shifts in early spring, slowly, quietly, then suddenly all at once. Oliver looked at her across the table. "You're ready," Oliver said. It was not a question. Serena closed her notebook. She picked up her phone and called Thomas to confirm the San Francisco team was on standby. And then she walked to the window and looked out at the city below, bright and cold and enormous. The city she had shaped, in its invisible way, for 12 years. She had cut her hair the previous week, shorter than she had worn it in years, clean and precise. She was dressed simply. Dark trousers, a pale gray blouse, flat boots. No performance, no armor. Just herself, exactly herself, which had always been enough. The custody hearing was held on a Tuesday morning in April, in a courtroom on the 4th floor of the New York Family Court building on Lafayette Street. Outside, the city was beginning its reluctant turn toward spring. A faint warmth in the air. Crocuses coming up through the soil in City Hall Park a few blocks away, the kind of fragile morning that feels like a promise the world is not quite sure it can keep. Serena arrived 20 minutes early. She was alone. No assistant, no entourage, no visible support team. Oliver was in the building but seated in the hallway, available but not beside her, because Serena had decided to walk into the room on her own terms. She wore a charcoal suit, quietly cut, with a single thin gold chain at her neck. She carried a leather portfolio. She looked like exactly what she was. A woman who understood how rooms like this worked and was not afraid of them. Brett arrived with 2 attorneys from Hargrove and Klein, and a woman Serena did not recognize, who was, she would later learn, a communications consultant hired to monitor how the proceedings might be framed publicly. He was dressed impeccably. He looked well rested. When he saw Serena across the room, his expression shifted, very briefly, oh so briefly that most people would have missed it, into something that was not quite surprise and not quite concern. It was the expression of a man who has decided he is winning and has just registered, for the first time, the faintest possibility that he might not be. He looked away quickly. Serena took her seat. The hearing lasted 3 hours. Oliver's firm had filed a comprehensive counter-motion the week before. Documentation of the illegally obtained and leaked psychiatric record. A forensic report from a privacy law specialist confirming the breach. Evidence of Brett's deliberate obstruction of Serena's contact with Lily over a 6-week period. And a statement from Lily's school counselor attesting to the child's emotional distress at the separation from her mother. Brett's attorneys argued. They were skilled, composed, and methodical. They pointed to Serena's medical history, her surgery, the period of hospitalization. They suggested that her recovery was incomplete, that her ability to provide stable care was uncertain, that the child's best interests were served by consistency and a structured home environment. The judge, a woman in her early 60s with reading glasses and the unhurried manner of someone who had presided over a great many rooms like this one, listened to both sides without expression. She asked several pointed questions of Brett's attorneys regarding the sourcing of the medical record. The attorneys' answers were careful and not entirely satisfying. The judge made a note. Then the judge asked if Lily could be brought in. Lily came in through a side door with a court-appointed advocate, a young woman named Sandra, who held Lily's hand lightly, the way you hold the hand of someone who is doing something brave. Lily was wearing a yellow cardigan, and her hair was in 2 braids, and she looked very small in the large room and very steady at the same time, the way children sometimes do when they have decided that something important depends on them being steady. The judge spoke to her quietly, directly, in plain language. She asked her where she felt safe. She asked her who she wanted to be with. Lily looked at Serena across the room. She said, in a clear voice that carried to every corner, "I want to go home to my mom." Brett's attorney started to speak. The judge raised one hand, very slightly, and the attorney stopped. The judge made another note. Serena did not allow herself to exhale until she was back in the hallway, as where Oliver was waiting. And even then she kept it quiet. Just a long, slow breath. Her hand pressed flat against the cold marble wall for 1 second before she stood straight again. The credit application was submitted by Callaway Developments on the 1st of May. It went to a consortium of 5 private lending institutions, anchored by a wealth management firm on Park Avenue that specialized in high-net-worth real estate financing. The application was for a $200 million revolving credit facility, secured against a portfolio of Callaway Developments' existing assets, including, listed on page 7, in a section detailing equity positions, a 30% profit-sharing stake in the Queens mixed-use development project, valued at approximately $85 million. Now, Thomas Reed received a copy of the application within 48 hours of its submission through channels that were legal and quiet, and that Brett's team would not have thought to monitor. Thomas forwarded it to Oliver at 6 a.m. with a single line. He did it. Oliver was in Serena's apartment by 7. Serena read the application at the kitchen table while her tea went cold. The equity stake Brett had listed as collateral, the 30% profit-sharing position in the Queens project, was not simply an asset of Callaway Developments. It was an asset held under the terms of the consulting agreement between Callaway Developments and Wade Capital Group. The agreement had a clause, negotiated by Thomas 4 years earlier and signed by Brett without apparent careful reading, that stipulated, in the event of any attempt to leverage, encumber, or transfer the equity stake without the written consent of the capital partner, Wade Capital Group, the entire position would revert immediately to the capital partner's sole ownership. Brett had not obtained written consent. He did not know he needed it, because he did not know who Wade Capital Group was. He had just tried to borrow $200 million against something that was no longer his. Oliver filed the notice of reversion with the relevant legal parties that afternoon. Within 24 hours, the lending consortium had received formal documentation that the collateral Brett had pledged was subject to a prior contractual claim. The consortium paused the application. Their legal team requested clarification, where Brett's attorneys received the notice at 4:30 on a Thursday, and by the account of a paralegal who would later speak to a reporter, the atmosphere in the Hargrove and Klein offices that evening was not calm. Brett called Serena's cell phone at 8 that night. She let it ring. Then she listened to the voicemail. He did not say much. His voice was controlled, but only barely. He said, "We need to talk. Whatever this is, we need to talk about it before this gets worse for both of us." She did not call back. She called Oliver and said, "Set the date." The date she meant was the date of the shareholder and investor briefing that Wade Capital Group had been quietly arranging for the previous 6 weeks, a presentation of the company's 12-year performance record and strategic outlook, done to be held at the offices of a financial advisory firm on the 41st floor of a building on Fifth Avenue. The guest list included 14 institutional investors, 4 board members, 3 journalists from financial publications, and, because Thomas had extended the invitation through a third-party events coordinator with no mention of who was behind the company, one Brett Callaway, whose firm had been described to him as a potential acquisition target seeking new capital relationships. Brett's assistant had confirmed his attendance. He would be in that room. He would sit down expecting to meet investors who needed his help. And he would find something else entirely. Oliver set the date for the 15th of May. Serena put the phone down and looked out the window at the city. The lights of Fifth Avenue were visible from where she stood, strung below the dark sky like a row of bright, even, unbroken promises. She thought of Lily. She thought of her mother. She thought of 12 years of building something real in the dark, with no audience and no applause, for exactly this moment. She was ready. The evening of May 14th, Serena did not sleep. She was not anxious exactly. Anxiety was the wrong word for what she felt. Anxiety was the feeling of facing something you were not prepared for. And she had been preparing for this for longer than most people would believe. What she felt was more like the stillness before a door opens. The held breath of a final moment of private knowing before everything becomes public and irreversible and real. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time with nothing in front of her. Just the table, just the window, just the city outside doing its ordinary midnight work. A few blocks away, the park was dark and quiet. Farther uptown, the lights of Riverside Drive ran in a long gold line beside the river. She had always loved this city, not romantically, the way people who were not from here sometimes loved it, but practically, intimately, the way you love something you understand, something whose rhythms you know in your body. Thomas had flown back from San Francisco that morning. He was staying at a hotel near Grand Central. He had texted her at 9:30. "Everything's ready. Get some rest." She had appreciated the text more than she could explain. It was the kind of communication she valued most, not reassurance, not sentiment. Just a clean statement of readiness. She and Thomas had developed a particular kind of trust over 12 years. It was built on very few words and a great deal of demonstrated judgment, on having each other's interests reflected faithfully in every action without having to negotiate it each time. She respected him in a way she had rarely respected anyone, because he had never once tried to take credit for what was hers. Never once made her feel that her invisibility in the structure was something other than a strategic choice. He had simply held his part of it, quietly and competently, for a very long time. She thought about that now, about the strangeness of having spent more than a decade in close professional partnership with someone and only seeing them in person a handful of times, about how well you could know a person through their decisions. She thought about the dinner at the River Cafe, the way he had listened without interrupting, the way he had said, "Tell me where we are," and meant it as a practical question, but had somehow made it feel like something more. The way he had set the folder down on the table between them as though he understood that what was in it belonged to her, and he was simply carrying it for now. She had not let herself think about Thomas in any other register than professional. It was a discipline she had maintained carefully, not because she was unaware of the other register, but because the timing had always been wrong. And she did not make decisions, professional or personal, when the timing was wrong. After tomorrow, the timing might be different. She allowed herself to think that, briefly, and then set it aside. She went to the small desk in the second bedroom and opened her leather notebook to the last page of notes. She read through the sequence one final time. The order of the presentation, the legal disclosures, the moment at which Oliver would enter the room with the formation documents, the timing of the press release that had been drafted and queued and was waiting for her signal. She closed the notebook. She went to the window. The city was the same city it had always been, enormous and indifferent, and full of people who were also in their own rooms and at their own tables, sitting with whatever they had built or lost or were still trying to hold together. She thought about Lily, already asleep in the apartment 3 blocks away, where she had been staying with Serena since the custody hearing. She thought about her mother in Riverdale, with her crossword books and her kettle. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Thomas. "I'll see you tomorrow." It went through at 12:41 in the morning. His reply came back in less than a minute. "I'll be there." She set the phone down and went to bed. The 41st floor of the building on Fifth Avenue was quiet when the guests began to arrive at 9 in the morning. The conference room had been arranged by Wade Capital's event team with the particular restraint that signals serious money. No flowers, no elaborate centerpieces. Just a long table with leather chairs, a screen at the far end, water glasses and legal pads at each seat, and a view of Manhattan through floor-to-ceiling glass that rendered decoration unnecessary. Below, the city moved in its ordinary current of yellow cabs and pedestrian traffic, and the low, continuous sound of a world going about its business. The institutional investors arrived first, 14 of them, from firms in New York, Boston, Chicago, and one from London. They came in quietly, introduced themselves to Thomas, who stood near the door with his usual composed economy of manner. Oliver was already seated at the far end of the table, a slim folder in front of her, her reading glasses on, a cup of black coffee untouched beside her. The financial journalists arrived. They had been told this was a performance briefing for an established mid-sized investment group. They had been told it was off the record until the company indicated otherwise. They took seats along the side wall. At 9:22, Brett Calloway walked in, and he was dressed the way he always dressed for this kind of meeting. A dark navy suit, a white shirt, no tie. The careful informality of a man who wants to appear relaxed without sacrificing authority. He had come alone, which surprised Serena. She had expected at least one attorney. The absence of one suggested he still thought this was routine. A prospective investor meeting, an introduction, something he could charm his way through. He shook hands with Thomas at the door. He said something. Thomas nodded. Brett found a seat on the left side of the table, midway down, with the view of the city behind him. He had not yet seen Serena. She came in through the side door at 9:29. She was dressed in a black suit, cut clean and straight, on no ornament except a narrow gold watch on her left wrist. The watch her mother had given her the day she graduated from Georgetown. A slim Tissot that Eleanor had saved for 2 years to buy. Her hair was short and neat. She carried nothing. She did not look around the room as she entered. She walked to the head of the table with the unhurried certainty of a person who knows exactly which chair is theirs. She sat down. She looked at the room, and then she looked at Brett. He had seen her at the same moment she sat. He was completely still. The color in his face, the comfortable flush of a man who had spent the drive over composing his confident introduction, had gone quiet. His hand, which had been resting on the legal pad in front of him, was motionless. She gave him 3 seconds. Just 3. Then she looked away, eyes toward the screen at the far end of the table. And she said, in a voice that was even and clear and carried to every corner of the room, "Thank you all for being here. My name is Serena Wade. I am the founder and majority owner of Wade Capital Group. This morning, we're going to review 12 years of portfolio performance, current asset holdings, and strategic direction." She paused. "And then," she said, "we're going to address a matter of significant legal importance regarding a consulting relationship that some of you may find unexpected." No one spoke. The room was very still, the way rooms are still when the people in them understand that something they did not anticipate is about to happen. Brett's hands had both moved off the table now. They were below the surface, where no one could see them. He had understood, or he had understood everything. Serena spoke for 40 minutes without notes. She began with the company's origins, the premarital inheritance, the first acquisition in the Bronx, the careful and patient expansion across 12 years. She spoke about the structure, the strategy, the reasoning behind the decisions she had made. She spoke about it the way she had always understood it, as work, serious and considered and earned, not as revelation or spectacle. She had built this. She was describing what she had built. That was all. The screen behind her showed charts, asset maps, portfolio performance figures. The numbers were large, and they were real, and they were, in every relevant legal sense, hers and hers alone. Oliver stood when Serena finished the performance overview, and she placed the formation documents on the table. Certified copies, notarized, with the original signature of Eleanor J. Wade and the incorporation date going back 12 years. She placed the pre-marital financial records that established the source of the seed capital. She placed the legal opinion she had commissioned from a senior partner at one of New York's oldest corporate law firms, which stated in unambiguous language that the entirety of Wade Capital Group's assets fell outside the marital estate by every applicable standard of New York law. Then she placed the consulting agreement and Brett's thank you note. 4 years ago, Oliver said, addressing the room in her measured, factual voice, New Callaway Developments entered into a capital partnership with Wade Capital Group for a mixed-use development project in the borough of Queens. Mr. Callaway executed this agreement personally. The agreement contains a standard reversion clause protecting the capital partner's equity position against unauthorized encumbrance. She looked at Brett. Earlier this month, she continued, Mr. Callaway submitted an application for a $200 million credit facility. He listed the Queen's equity position as collateral. He did not seek the required consent of the capital partner. Under the terms of the signed agreement, that equity stake has now reverted in full to Wade Capital Group. The room was very quiet. Oliver set a final document on the table, a signed statement from Kevin Marsh, prepared in exchange for partial immunity from civil action, attesting to the unauthorized disclosure of confidential proprietary information to Brett Callaway and his legal team, and confirming that he had acted at the direction of and in coordination with Brett Callaway's attorneys. The illegal disclosure of my client's medical records, Oliver said, was orchestrated in coordination with Callaway Development's legal counsel. We have filed the relevant complaints with the New York State Bar Association and with the Federal Privacy Enforcement Authority. One of the financial journalists was typing rapidly on her phone. Another was watching Brett. Brett had not moved. His face had the look of a man in a room that has shifted entirely around him. The walls and floor all wrong, nothing familiar, no handhold available. He was very still in the way that is not calm. The stillness of shock, of a calculation coming back with an answer so far from what was expected that the mind has not yet caught up with it. Jade Fontaine's name appeared on the screen behind Serena, alongside documentation of the coordinated media campaign. The timed leaks to the gossip sites, the strategic framing, the communications firm she worked for, and the payments traced to Callaway Development's operating account. Thomas spoke last. He described the business relationship in precise, factual terms. He did not editorialize. He did not need to. When the presentation was over, Serena stood. She looked at the room, at the investors, at the journalists, at Oliver, at Thomas, at the view of the city through the glass. She looked at Brett one more time. He was staring at the table. She said to the room generally, "Thank you for your time. Oliver will remain to answer any questions." Then she picked up her watch. She had taken it off to adjust the clasp during the presentation. And she put it back on her wrist, the small gold Tissot her mother had saved 2 years to give her. And she walked to the door. And she left. The news moved quickly, the way news always moves in New York when it involves money and a reversal that no one predicted. By midday, 2 financial publications had run initial reports based on the morning's briefing. By evening, the story had been picked up by 3 major outlets. The framing was the same across all of them. A minor variation on the same essential fact: that the founder of a $1.3 billion investment firm had conducted her entire 12-year career in private, while being publicly known only as the wife of a mid-sized real estate developer, and that the same developer had recently and unsuccessfully attempted to leverage company assets he did not own against contractual obligations he had not read. Brett's credit application was formally declined by the lending consortium within 72 hours of the Fifth Avenue briefing. The consortium issued no public statement, but 2 of their representatives quietly reached out to Thomas Reed's office to open a different conversation, one about Wade Capital Group's own pipeline. Brett's attorneys at Hargrove and Klein filed a motion to contest the reversion clause the following week. The motion was denied. The judge's written ruling was 41 pages, and the relevant passage, which Oliver read to Serena over the phone in the even voice of someone reporting a weather forecast, was clear. The contract said what it said. It had been signed freely, and the clause was enforceable. The bar complaints regarding the leaked medical record resulted in a formal investigation of 2 members of Hargrove and Klein's family law division. One resigned before the investigation concluded. The partner overseeing the Callaway account received a public censure that would follow him in professional directories for the foreseeable future. Jade Fontaine's employer, the media consulting firm in Midtown, parted ways with her quietly, but not quietly enough. The departure was reported by a trade publication as a strategic restructuring. 3 of the firm's major clients, whose representatives had been in the room on Fifth Avenue or had been briefed by those who were, did not renew their contracts. The firm entered a restructuring that was not, by most accounts, strategic. Kevin Marsh did not return to any position in the industry in which he had spent 3 years building a reputation. He had signed his name to a statement that no one in the business would forget. Callaway Developments itself did not collapse immediately. Brett still owned the company. He still had assets, relationships, a working operation, but the credit he had needed to fund his next phase of growth was no longer available to him at the terms he had expected. The Queens Project's equity stake, the position he had staked his near-term expansion on, was now Wade Capital Group's. And the story of how he had come to sign that consulting agreement without knowing whose company he was signing with was not the kind of story that went away. Within 6 months, Callaway Developments would be significantly smaller. Within a year, Brett would sell the company's flagship development, the one in Midtown that he had always considered proof of his success, to settle obligations that had compounded beyond what the business could carry. None of this was Serena's doing, not directly. She had not wanted destruction. She had wanted justice, and justice, in this case, looked like consequence. The simple, thorough application of cause and effect to decisions made freely by a person who had assumed he would never be held to them. She did not follow the news coverage closely. She did not read the comment sections. She read one article, the first one, to confirm that the facts were reported accurately. Then she closed the laptop and went to the kitchen, where Lily was at the table doing homework, a bowl of grapes beside her and a pencil behind her ear. And she sat down across from her daughter and asked how the math was going. Lily looked up. "Fractions," she said, with the expression of a child who has been personally wronged by the concept. Serena smiled. "I can help with that." June came, and with it the particular gentleness of a New York summer before the heat has fully arrived. Mornings that were soft and clear, light falling early through the windows, the city moving at a tempo that felt, for a few weeks each year, almost forgiving. The custody order was finalized on a Wednesday in the second week of June. Sole custody to Serena Wade. Brett was granted monthly supervised visitation, contingent on a 12-week co-parenting evaluation. The judge's written order included language that Serena would read several times in the days that followed. Not triumphantly, but the way you read something that confirms what you already believed to be true and needed to see said clearly by someone with the authority to say it. Oliver sent her a single text when the order came through. Done. Serena was in Riverdale when she read it. Now she was sitting on her mother's couch, and Eleanor was in the kitchen making tea. And Lily was on the floor with a large piece of drawing paper doing something elaborate with colored markers. Serena read the text. Then she looked at the room, at her mother moving quietly in the kitchen, at the pale June light through the windows, at her daughter drawing on the floor, and she felt something that she did not have a precise name for. Not happiness exactly, or not only happiness. Something larger and more complicated. The feeling of a structure finally bearing weight, of work done over a very long time, finally being complete. She said nothing about the order. She did not tell Lily that day. There would be time for explanations later, in language a 10-year-old could hold. For now she just sat on the couch and watched her daughter draw. And Thomas Reed was still in New York. He had extended his stay 3 times for reasons that were, he said, operational. Investor meetings, due diligence on a new acquisition that Wade Capital was evaluating in the Hudson Valley. Serena believed this was true, because with Thomas it was always true. He did not manufacture reasons. But she also noticed that the meetings consistently ended in the late afternoon, and that on 4 occasions in June he had called to ask if she and Lily wanted to get dinner, and that Lily had, on each occasion, said yes with an enthusiasm that had nothing to do with the food. On one of those evenings, the 3 of them had walked back from a restaurant on the Upper West Side through Central Park in the long summer light, Lily running ahead to investigate a family of ducks near the pond. And Thomas had walked beside Serena without speaking for a while, which was one of the things she appreciated most about him. That he was not afraid of silence, that he understood it as something that could hold meaning without requiring it to be converted into words. After a while, he said, "What comes next?" She considered the question. "The Hudson Valley acquisition," she said. "The investor presentation in Boston in September. The position in Chicago that we've been watching for 2 years." "I meant for you," he said, "not the company." She looked at the park. The light was going gold through the trees. Lily was crouching at the edge of the pond, with her arms wrapped around her knees, talking to a duck that was not listening. Serena said after a moment, "I think I'd like to stop being invisible." Thomas was quiet for a beat, and then he said, "You haven't been invisible to me, not for a long time." She turned and looked at him. He was looking at her with the straightforward, unhurried attention she had come to know as the truest thing about him. She nodded once, slowly. "I know," she said. Lily called from the pond, "Mom, Thomas, there are 6 ducks." They walked toward her. On a Friday morning in September, Serena Wade stood on the stage of a conference center on 5th Avenue in front of 400 people and introduced Wade Capital Group to the world. Not as a holding company with a man's name on the door. Not as a structure held together by silence and strategic invisibility. As itself, a 12-year-old investment firm with assets under management of $1.3 billion, a track record of consistent performance, and a founder who had, until now, chosen to remain private, and who had decided, for reasons she did not feel the need to explain in detail, that it was time to stop. She had prepared remarks. She did not use them. She spoke for 20 minutes without a note in front of her, the way she had always worked best. From the accumulated intelligence of years, from the architecture of decisions made carefully and not forgotten, from the knowledge that she understood this business better than anyone in the room could have guessed until she began to speak. The audience listened the way people listen when they are surprised by competence they did not expect. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. The kind of silence that precedes a large, genuine response, the kind that cannot be manufactured. And then the room was very loud. She stood at the podium and let it happen. In the front row, Eleanor Wade sat with her crossword puzzle book in her lap, unopened, and watched her daughter with an expression that was not surprise, because she had never been surprised by this. Only by how long it had taken the world to catch up. Beside Eleanor sat Lily, dressed in a navy sweater with a small golden star stitched at the collar, who was clapping with both hands over her head, which was not the dignified response the room's protocol called for and was exactly right. Thomas was at the side of the stage. He had introduced Serena, briefly, precisely, without flourish, and then stepped back, which was the thing about him that Serena had always understood and valued most. He knew how to hold space for someone without taking any of it. She found his face from the podium when the applause settled. He gave her a single nod. She gave one back. They had had dinner the week before, just the two of them, at a small restaurant in the West Village that had no view and no status, and made very good pasta. They had talked about the Hudson Valley acquisition and about Lily's new school year and about a book he had been reading. Meditations, of all things, battered copy he'd carried for years. And somewhere in the middle of the evening she had thought, this is what it feels like when the person across the table from you is not performing anything. And she had decided that was worth more than almost anything she could name. She had not told him that, not in those words. She would, eventually. She was in no hurry. After the conference, she walked out into the September morning with Eleanor on one side and Lily on the other, and Thomas a half step behind. And Fifth Avenue was exactly what it always was. Loud and enormous and full of ordinary life going on in every direction. And she felt no urge to mark the moment with anything grand. She had done the work. The work was done. What came next was just living, fully, visibly, under her own name, on her own terms. Lily took her hand. She took it back. They walked down Fifth Avenue together, in the bright September light. Four people who had found their way to the same moment from very different distances. And the city moved around them the way it always does, indifferent and magnificent, making room. This story is a work of fiction. All characters, events, companies, and situations depicted are entirely fictional and created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. This narrative is intended to explore themes of resilience, identity, and self-determination in a dramatic format. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that starting over is not the same as losing. Like, subscribe, and we will see you in the next one. So the story has finally come to a close. And if you are still here with us right now, still watching, still breathing through every single part of this journey with Serena, then I think something in this story touched a part of you that you maybe did not expect it to, and I want to sit with you in that for just a moment. Your boss, because here is what Serena's story is really about. Underneath all the courtrooms and the boardrooms, and the moment she walked through that door and sat down at the head of that table. It is about something the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote centuries ago, in a book he never intended for anyone else to read. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Serena did not fight Brett with anger. She fought him with patience, with preparation, with the quiet, unshakable belief that what she had built in the dark was real, and that real things hold. That is the lesson. Not revenge, not bitterness. The slow, steady, dignified act of continuing to build. Even when no one is watching. Especially when no one is watching. If this story meant something to you today, please give it a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their quiet strength is not weakness. It is the most powerful thing they own. And if you are not subscribed yet, join us. There are more stories like this one waiting for you. We will see you in the next one. Just a quick note before you go. This entire story is a work of fiction, created purely for dramatic storytelling and entertainment purposes. Serena Wade, Brett Calloway, Oliver Nash, Thomas Reed, Lily, Eleanor, and every other character you met in this story are completely fictional. They are not based on any real individuals, living or deceased. The companies, legal proceedings, financial figures, and events depicted in this narrative do not represent any real organizations or actual occurrences. Any resemblance to real persons, real businesses, or real situations is entirely coincidental and unintentional. This story was written to explore universal themes of resilience, self-worth, patience, and the quiet courage it takes to rebuild your life after betrayal. It is not intended to represent factual events or make claims about any real person or entity. We believe in honest, transparent storytelling, and we want every person watching to enjoy this content knowing exactly what it is. A dramatic, emotional story crafted with care, created to inspire, not to mislead. Thank you for watching with an open and understanding heart.